Welcome back to Politics Tonight. Now let's get to our interview with the guest of the day. I'm joined by the Program Manager of Election for Younger Africa, Paul James, and tonight to discuss an INEC and the search for electoral integrity. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Paul James. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Right. So off-season governorship polls will hold in Bayelsa, Imo, and Kogi states soon. How will you describe INEC's preparations?
So far, I think INEC came up with the 14, 15-point agenda sometime around the beginning of the year, and they have been meticulously following the agenda to the much that we know. Last week, following what the Commission had been doing, they gave out the register of voters to political parties. And before now, if you also recall, between the 9th of September and the 10th of October, the Commission also facilitated the collection of PVCs for voters in those states that were yet to collect the PVCs. But before we arrive at this stage, there has been a bit of concern as to how the Commission was engaging the three elections, especially because since after the February and March general elections, to some extent, there is this sense or this feeling like the Commission has been a bit quiet until, much later around July or so before, that momentum also picked up preparatory to those elections. But for the much that we know, there has been an intense engagement by the Commission in the three states. There has been efforts also by the Commission to recruit and train ad hoc staff. And of course, like I had mentioned, the PVC collection that had also happened in the three states. But there was also an expectation before now, especially from the citizens of the three states, especially confusion as to whether or not the Commission was going to engage in the continuous voter registration exercise. As we know, it was suspended in January of this year, just before, it was suspended sometimes last year, just before, as the Commission continued to prepare for the general election. So it wasn't very clear whether the Commission was going to resume the continuous voter registration in those three states. What will have solved this problem for me will have been a very clear communication on the part of the Commission to, provide those sort of guidance to the citizens of the three states as to how it intends to engage. But as it stands, I think to some extent, the Commission is in the right, is on the right footing as it continues to prepare for those elections.
Right. So these elections will be the first to be conducted after the disputed 2023 general election. How confident are you that we will witness something significant next month? Well,
I think it is, like we will continue to say, another opportunity for the Commission to redeem itself, especially because there has been some sort of public, if you like, citizen disillusionment as to how the Commission had approached the general election, especially around its public communication. Now, it was an election that was predicated on the use of technology, that is speaking about the 2023 general election. And then as we approached the election, whilst there was a lot of public, there was a lot of enthusiasm, especially on the part of young people to participate, there was a lot of public excitement that the Commission was going to do something differently. We saw how that process went. I thought the Commission didn't manage its own, there wasn't much around crisis communication or crisis management for the general election. One will expect that while, there was, in some sense, the Commission deepened the application of technology in the election. Accreditation of voters was done using technology, but what didn't go well was the, if you like, the upload of election results on the day of the presidential election. So I expected that as that was happening immediately, the Commission would have addressed the public. But what we got from the Commission that evening was a statement that says that it experienced glitch. And as we speak, up to this moment, there hasn't been any form of accountability to really tell the public what sort of glitch it experienced and what it has done to mitigate that and to ensure that that doesn't also occur in the coming election. But one thing that also had happened is that we didn't also manage expectations well. That was an election that the Commission was deploying that kind of technology on a massive scale. In January of this year, the much that we know, that the devices, that is the bimodal voter accreditation systems, were deployed across all INEC offices nationwide. There was a field test of those devices that happened in the states, but there wasn't much information about that. For locations that we were able, that is at Yaga Africa, locations that we were privy to what the Commission did and were able to observe, we noticed some challenges. For instance, there were concerns around some of those devices not connecting to network. There were concerns around some of the equipment, for instance, cameras not working, power button not working. The assurance we got from some of the Commission staff was that, all of this will be resolved before the election. If you recall also in that election that the Commission conducted a mock exercise barely 20 days to the election. That was on the 4th of February, and that happened in around about 316 locations. Less than even 1% of the total number of polling units that we had, 176,000 polling units. Now, for the best that we thought, the Commission could have cherry-picked this location and also even the devices because things went well. But I thought there would have been an opportunity to test this even in more locations. Nothing should have stopped the Commission from even making an attempt to test the devices in all of the wards. We have 809 wards. Perhaps that will give us some sense of the level of preparedness, especially the readiness assessment of the devices before the election. Again, last weekend, the Commission conducted, just before this pre-election, it conducted a mock exercise. To some extent, that process also went well. But if you look at the number of polling units in these three states, Kogi have about 3,508 polling units, Imo about 4,700 polling units, Bayelsa about 2,244 polling units. Now, what is the percentage of this location that the Commission also conducted field tests? Just in 29 locations. And then, by now we should begin to talk about how many of those devices have been deployed to the states, how many of these devices have been tested to ensure that they are ready, that we also don't have a repeat of what had happened in the last election. Another point to also mention is this concern around public perception even about the Commission. To some extent, confidence in the Commission has dwindled. I was in Kogi State in September. I was also in Imo State in September, and I can tell you the sense we are getting from that state is that there was some sort of lethargy from the public, some sort of disillusionment you see in the air that people don't so much trust that the Commission is going to do anything different. And so, you expect that while I see some effort on the part of the Commission, that more will also have been done, or more is expected to be done as the Commission continues to interface and engage with the public ahead of those elections.
All right. Right. So, Mr. Paul, because stakeholders like you have said no elections across the world is smooth or devoid of one glitch or the other, and so glitches will come. But are you saying that INEC needs to be more accountable to Nigerians to regain public confidence?
There is no running away from that. Accountability in the sense, again, I go back to the 2023 election that came with so much promises. That election had happened, and up to this moment, there hasn't been some sort of audit of what really transpired in the election. Perhaps people may just have been making assumptions as to the failure of the technology or even how some of the INEC officials were complicit in the election. INEC should have come clean to tell Nigerians, like, does all of this unnecessary tension that is happening, come clean to tell Nigerians what really happened in the election. And if there are people that perhaps did what the Commission didn't expect them to do, have they been apprehended? Has there been any form of sanction? One of the concerns from that election, even as we pivot towards this coming election, is around how INEC had applied its own rules across the different locations or the different polling units. Now, that is also one thing that had affected public confidence. If you recall in that election, specifically the March 18 election, for a state like Adamawa, after the election, we got, a difference of about 31,000 votes between the two major contenders in the election. The commission decided to go for a supplementary election. You got states like Kaduna that have about 10,000 votes different between the two major contenders. The commission didn't call for supplementary, or even states like Ogun with difference of around 19,000. So you see different application of rules across different locations. Of course, it will arouse this sort of agitation or this sort of public sentiment that we see towards the commission. So like I said, we hope redress have been made, and if that had happened also, maybe there should be some form of accountability matrix, and even on the part of the commission, like we will continue to emphasize, engage the public and tell the public what you have done to remedify those issues or those concerns that people, genuine concerns, if you, to the best that I know from the election, and how is the commission planning to ensure that they don't happen again as we engage the 3 elections in these states. Now, these are also, for state elections, there are different dynamics, different things play out around the election. Most times when you want to compare elections at the subnational level, you compare one election against the other, against the next election. For instance, it will not make sense to begin to talk about election in Bayelsa and you're comparing election in Bayelsa and Kogi, because different terrain, different issues, different challenges. In Bayelsa, one of the biggest concerns we know is that it's riverine. Over 90%, over 70% of the state is covered in water. There is this analogy or this saying in the state, he who controls the water has the election. We saw the challenges that had happened in the 2019 election, where in some locations, INEC staff were kidnapped, election materials were hijacked. What is the commission doing, maybe in partnership with the security agency, to ensure that we don't see that also happen in the coming election? Another thing, again, in the Bayelsa election is, something that wasn't within the control of the commission, the concern around flooding. On election day in 2019, I was in Yenogua. We saw in the morning of the election that the commission even had to move some voters because of flooding concerns. They had to move polling units rather because of flooding concerns. And then people didn't have prior information. They showed up at the polling unit and realized, oh, they have been moved. What sort of plan is the commission putting in place aside of public communication to ensure also that when this sort of things happen, that people will be able to easily navigate and also be able to access their polling unit? Again, in terms of building public confidence, one of the things that was discovered during the presidential, the last election, was the fact that voters were reallocated to polling units. There wasn't also much communication around that. People only got to discover that during the mock accreditation exercise that they have been moved. What the commission simply did at that point in time was to send out a text blast telling people how to identify or how to locate their polling unit. Now, the question to ask is, how many people even have access to or internet savvy that are able to even access internet to even begin to know how to apply themselves to getting to know where to go and vote on election day? So we hope that all of these communications, like I will keep saying, are very clear, and that for the coming election, again, people will be able to easily identify their polling unit. The commission will also be readily available to provide all the kind of help that voters will need so that they are able to vote as they would like to vote.
Right. So having said all this, what major task will you say INEC has ahead of it in these governorship elections?
So, as we engage the governorship election again, I don't also, in fairness to the commission, that we don't also leave everything to the doorstep of the commission. That is why you also have every stakeholder. But what, that also engages in the process, political parties, CSOs, and the likes. But what always happens around election is that people are always territorial in their conversation or engagement of the election. If you think around things about voter education, for me, which is not rocket science, voter education, voter information, as simple as sometimes even telling people where to go and vote, how to go and vote. We have provided information, but most times you begin to see among these stakeholders, whilst a process is done and after the process, people are accusing finger at the other stakeholder. Oh, INEC didn't do well. Oh, CSOs didn't do well, and all of that. I think this is also the time that we all need to also rally around. This is also the time that the stakeholders need to build bridges and also see what will need to be done so that we can get the best of the coming election. For the political parties, for instance, they command the biggest followership. As they go about their political campaigns, let it just be more, let us go beyond the usual rhetoric that we hear around political campaigns, but more concrete engagement that tells voters about their rights, more concrete engagement that tells voters about how they should vote on election day, more concrete engagement also around how voters should know how to apply themselves to mandate protection. CSOs are doing well, to the best that I know, again, because data that we had received from Imo State has pointed to the fact that in terms of voter education campaign, the CSOs are doing more. But we also expect more from the agencies of government like the National Orientation Agency, even INEC itself, that we don't rest on our oars. This is actually when everybody needs to work towards how we will work towards regaining that public confidence in our process. Because I am most concerned about legitimacy of political offices, that the more and more people shy away from engaging in the process, the more we also open the process to abuses, because what we have seen also with some of those elections that were conducted in the past is the fact that it is when people don't even go out to engage that the bad elements within the system get the chance to manipulate it to however they want to manipulate the process. So we hope that people will not be deterred, that irrespective of what happened in the past, that people will have that confidence that when they go and engage, for them, they will also help to ensure the integrity of the process, but then also to understand that there are also people that are watching the process to ensure that their votes count and to ensure that other stakeholders do what is right by the people.
All right. Mr. James, let's talk about voter apathy. I mean, this has always been a big challenge in our election. With 5.4 million voters registered for the polls in Bayelsa, Imo, and Kogi states, are we likely to witness an improvement? And what do you think can be done to get more people to vote on election day?
Well, now, for me, it's even a bigger concern, because if you look around issues that sometimes inhibit voters from participating, sometimes it's even beyond their control. I see participation in a more broader sense to include even the moment the voter apply themselves to go engage, even from voter registration. We got over 93 million Nigerians that have registered to participate in our elections. And like you rightly pointed out, over 4 million in Bayelsa State. So from that point, they have shown interest to engage. Now, if you look at the factors that had caused apathy in the last election, as much as we don't want to talk about it, to some extent, I think it was a case of voter disillusionment, not necessarily apathy. Voters truly wanted to engage, but some factors limited their engagement. If you recall, before the presidential election, there was this Naira redesign policy, and then how it affected or impacted planning for the election in the part of the commission, and even for how it limited or affected voters from even engaging. Because I recall in that election, someone I knew that was stuck in Imo State that needed to return to Abuja because their registration was in Abuja. They couldn't access physical cash to come to Abuja. Of course, for that, they were not able to participate in the election. And if you also recall what had happened across some locations on the morning of the election, there were concerns around logistics again on the part of the commission, delayed commencement of polls in some places where, for instance, if people only have, that window of opportunity to come engage within some limited time, and then INEC is not available to provide that opportunity for them, we lose that vote. Or if you think about also some sort of ethnic profiling that had happened in some location where some persons, because of what their physical appearance, were not even allowed to engage in the process. So, but having said that, I think the much concern that people had was about how the commission managed the process. I hope that the commission had learned and that the commission will improve. But what we have also seen is that most times the engagement for the national election are different from the subnational election. I give you a case in point. If you go to Anambra State and you see the statistics for engagement in Anambra State in the national election, you see higher statistics. But when it comes to the state election, it's always under 20%, 21%, 25%, or 24% in one of the governorship elections. So it is very, very concerning that people don't take the election that are even closest to them. That for me is even the most important. People don't take them as serious as we take the national election. Voter education efforts, as far as I know, always happen around those elections. Perhaps it's also, for me, the time that the citizens begin to have a rethink that is, if they want to have a voice in government or a voice in determining who becomes their leader, perhaps this is the opportunity, this is the time for them to do so. Because for me, sitting on the fence doesn't solve the problem. Not even going to vote, for me, is also another form of voting, because they also allow whoever they wouldn't want to emerge as the candidate in that, or the winner in that election. So it's an opportunity for me for a rethink, an opportunity for voters to think about how they engage, the strategies for their engagement. Like I said, concern around apathy is very broad. Sometimes even from the party nomination, the sort of option that the voters have before them when they go to vote. But if they truly want to engage, I truly believe that they also want to start following through all of these processes, from even party nomination. They want to be part of the process. I think it's also time that the voters begin to think about how to even engage or belong to some of these political parties, because this is where some of those decisions are made. Because what we have the primary election before we go into these other elections that we have. So if they want to have the kind of change they want or the kind of candidate they want, perhaps they need to begin to rethink about how to engage at the political party level. But then, even for the options that we have, we also have to understand that it's like mortgaging our future to whoever emerges as the candidate or as the winner in the election for the next 4 years. So to have a voice, to have a say, voters need to engage, voters need to participate.
All right, so let's talk about some of the new initiatives by your organization. Yaga Africa has called for Electoral Act amendments to enable early voting by essential service providers. What is the motive behind this?
Well, these are lessons from or learnings from other democracies or other elections that we have participated in, but also beyond that to say, if you look at the number of election workers and how we miss that percentage of votes in our own election, or how they don't get to also determine who becomes their leader, it is quite worrying. Think about election observers. In fact, for this coming election alone, over 131 different groups have applied to be observers in the election, according to INEC. Of these, I know a group like Yaga is deploying over 600 observers. So think about 600 votes, that 600 persons that may not get to vote because they are watching over the election. Other election workers like even INEC staff, election workers like security. I mean, it's just too much that when you put these numbers together and what we always miss, how we always miss out on this category of voters, we are saying it is time for the commission to begin to rethink how we want to incorporate this category of voters in our election. And we thought the best way to do so that it also doesn't affect their other responsibility around the election, the best way to do is to begin to think about an early voting opportunity. If you go to Ghana, this happens. The Liberia election that also had happened last weekend, it was, on the 10th of October, there was also the opportunity for early voting for election workers. So if it is happening in other democracies, why don't we also begin to try that in our democracies to give also this category of voters to vote? And if you also think about the political economy around election, the costs that go into planning for the election, INEC plans for even these voters that don't come out to vote. Think about the cost per voter. and then the sort of waste that we have been allowing in the process or in the system. So we think it is time for a rethink on the part of the Commission or other stakeholders to see that we make this happen in our elections in Nigeria.
All right. So another innovation Yaga Africa is making a case for is inclusion of photographs and names of candidates on the ballot paper in elections. Mr. James, why do you think this is necessary?
I think even from where, from where you sit, you agree with me that we think that will reduce a lot of indiscretion in our election. This will reduce a lot of things in our election, especially around voided votes. We thought if you have the face of a candidate, even if a person, a voter doesn't remember the party logo, perhaps they could identify something. They may be able to either identify the face of the candidate or be able to identify the face of, the logo of the party. And that could or that may reduce voided votes in our election. I think for me, it is the way to go. We have tried our options for a very long time, and we have also seen some concerns that have been raised about some of the ballot papers that have been printed by the Commission in the past. In some cases, you get report of ballot papers that don't even have logo of some parties, or ballot papers that are also not, sometimes not complete, or some parties are missing completely from the ballot paper. Maybe by the time we begin to introduce all of these other measures, having the face of the candidate, having the logo, it will some sort of provide some opportunity to do a better job in preparing ballot paper. It will provide opportunity for the voters, like I said, or for people that are also providing voter education. It will make it a lot easier for people to be able to educate people as to how to mark their ballots and how to vote on election day.
Well, but given how litigation drags on in this country, sometimes candidates for election are resolved by the courts less than 48 hours to elections. Is it really practicable?
Well, I think that's also another hurdle that we need to cross, especially around how people keep running to court sometimes to seek injunction. I will talk about the practicability, but even about how that has continued to derail election preparations. I recall in 2019, my colleagues were in Kogi, I was in Bayelsa, that even for us as observers, we had to reprint our election observation checklist just about 2 or 3 days to the elections in Kogi, because the court had ruled that one other party had to be included on the ballot. And when you think about the impact of that on election planning, even for the Commission, I think that was also why, in the wisdom of all of us that had engaged or campaigned around having the new electoral act, that was the wisdom behind why we want to see that everything around the election, preparatory to the election, things around litigations, are concluded well enough, in a good time, well ahead of the election. As much as that is what is anticipated, we know some persons keep going back and forth with the court, even very close to the election. So I think this is also where the judicial system also needs to begin to help the electoral processes. If you think also around some of the cases that ended up in the courts before the election, over 900 or thereabout cases, and more than 700 of those cases were thrown out. And just imagine even the time wasting, because sometimes even in the application, these things were not properly, the applications were not properly done, or even sometimes they go to the court and then realize, oh, they shouldn't even have been here in the first place. So we thought that should even be proper education about which sort of case the courses should even be entertaining. But more so, we need to begin to think around how that also affects planning for our election. So on the part of the Commission, I'll be honest, I don't also envy the Commission. It affects a lot of things. For the citizens, it also sometimes creates some sort of confusion as to even about how the citizens engage. We have suffered that, like I said, as observer group, but as much as it's not something I think we may run away from in any time soon, we need to begin to rethink about how our judiciary engage or handle some of these issues, and also make sure that we have a good timeline to sort finish off all of this so that they don't continue to affect or derail our election. But like I said, it's just having the face of someone on the ballot. If the commission or if the court ruled that the person should be replaced or another a party or candidate should be replaced, perhaps let that be done in a good enough time that the commission will be able to go back and reprint those ballots ahead of the elections.
All right, Mr. James, let's take a break. Paul James is the program manager of election for Yaga Africa, and we've been discussing INEC and the search for electoral integrity.